Hi, Sharif. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your insight into how you can take control of your financial health, especially during something like a layoff. I personally was laid off in April, so for me, it's been a few months of trying to manage a lower income while still paying for the same expenses. So it's definitely been challenging. So I first stumbled across your article on Business Insider, where you wrote about how your guidance to clients has changed during the pandemic. For those of us who missed that article, can you do a quick recap and share what has changed?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me, Danielle. I think that, this topic is really important for a lot of people who are especially dealing with, a lot as far as, a change of employment status as well as, a global pandemic. So I really appreciate you taking the time and inviting me to be a part of this great effort. So, in speaking about the article, I was really reflecting upon the period during the mid-March of 2020 through the mid part of May, where I was servicing clients right and left, not only on COVID related issues, but dealing with the CARES Act, the stimulus payment, unemployment. So there were a myriad of different issues that we were working with clients to help them navigate, all related to COVID. And I guess the whole trend of the article really helped us to understand that there were three main things going on that we really had to incorporate into our planning right away to help people navigate this period of uncertainty. And that included one, making sure people had plenty of liquid cash. And when I say liquid cash, I don't mean physical cash, but the ability to access funds for whatever basic needs. And I mean that included food, that included utilities, that included job search related costs, anything that was necessary to keep their families safe and keep their world pretty much stable. Spoke to, working with them to discuss, how to leverage, whether it's their unemployment benefits, coordinating that with severance packages. We also talked about, utilizing credit, any credit that they had available as a unconventional means to make sure that is whatever cash they had was as conserved as much as possible. The next step that we looked at was evaluating their health insurance policies, their long-term disability policies. Again, in the midst of a global pandemic, there was no question, there was no idea whether or not our clients or people that they were close to or part members of their family would get infected with COVID. So we needed to understand, you know, how their policies were structured to see whether or not they needed extra cash to be in place if someone were to become hospitalized. What would be the effect to their finances if someone became infected and couldn't work and was quarantined? In some situations, you've heard of certain people in certain positions who became infected and had to stay in hotels away from their family as an act of taking quarantine. And of course, you need funds for that. So just understanding the whole situation in the event of someone getting infected, was very important. And then lastly, especially dealing with some of our more, I guess, at-risk clients, was understanding how their estate planning documents were structured, if they had, applicable beneficiaries, the right beneficiaries in place, making sure they had advanced directives, financial power of attorney, medical proxies in place. All these things were important to ensure that in the event that someone did, if someone did get infected with COVID, and were, and had to be incapacitated, whether they were on a ventilator or something like that, that the family could still, function from a financial perspective.
Yeah, thank you. That's all really great advice. I know there's so many things to think about right now, finances being one of them, and everyone's kind of doing a balancing act of things right now. So thank you for that advice. The next question is pretty basic, but it's really the reality for a lot of folks right now. Do you have any best practices on how to manage a smaller income? So many of our attendees have families and a lot of other pressures that to be responsible for. So I'd love to know your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I guess when we're dealing with, managing a lower level of income, the most natural thing is to evaluate one's expenses, because if the top line is going down, then we have to find ways to reduce, the money that's going out the door. And, what's critical in being able to first take an assessment of what's going on and deciding what to cut, really revolves around whether the client has a quality, detailed, and informative budget. And I know sometimes that sounds pretty old school and archaic, but with technology today, the online access to bank accounts, credit card information, it's not so hard to put together that information. And in my experience through, this first wave of COVID, was that the resiliency of my clients and the ability for them to to really to really cut the fat right away, as a result of businesses being shut down. A lot of people were quick to start cooking because they were not so comfortable going out to order food, or order from a restaurant when infection rates were very high. So all of a sudden the need to go to a bar and spend 40-50 bucks a week went away overnight. So the test case has already shown us that we have the ability, when it's mandated upon us, to cut back. Now, with this whole experience, now it's now about putting our will into the situation and making the decisions for ourselves. We can easily cut back on cell phone bills by downgrading our phones and our services, switching to prepaid services. We can easily link up with friends to buy food in bulk to bring down cost of food per person or per household. We can also look to call our creditors to explain our situation, to negotiate deferments on payments, or to reduce our minimum payments to get those expenses down. But all those things need to be done right away. I guess the worst thing you could potentially do is nothing, and be like in a state of shock, where once that income number goes down, that is when you need to act to get all these expenses down right away.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I mean, I know that I'm included. I don't like the word budget and cutting back, but it's obviously a necessity right now. And, I think just being that we're so unsure as to when, we're all going to get jobs or find new income, it's really important to keep all of those points in mind. And I love that you said resiliency and it's about the will, because I know this group of attendees and event professionals are exactly that. So thank you for that advice. I really appreciate it. So my last question is kind of broader in scope, but what are your tips on maintaining overall financial health during really unpredictable times? We all clearly hope that nothing like this will ever happen again, but as planners, we love to prepare. So, is there anything we can be doing now in case we face this type of uncertainty again?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I would say literally like a week or two ago, there's a follow up article from my planning during COVID to planning in the wake of COVID that came out under Business Insider. And I would say some of the items that I kind of pointed to was, understanding that, the emergency fund really is a big deal. Um, you know, in the past, I would be one of the people that would say I was guilty of working with clients and explaining to them the importance of an emergency fund. But if they said, "Hey, we're working on it," or it's a work in progress, or "Hey, here's our plan for it," I would literally let them off the hook. But nowadays, you really can't. You really have to impress upon clients to say, "Hey, you know, this COVID thing is a wake up call for all of us to understand the importance of being liquid and being able to have the financial flexibility to deal with an immediate, reduction in income or a complete stop to your ability to earn a living of out of no fault of your own, right? So, I mean, this is the true definition of what an emergency fund is in place for, and also to, I know that there have been things that have been implemented along the way to try to help people, deal with the aftermath of the pandemic, whether it's, you know, work shortages, lack of income through the enhanced unemployment. But bear in mind, there's some people who still have not received their unemployment checks, even though they put in their application through the CARES Act back in March. Just the sheer volume of claims that are, overwhelming these unemployment offices across the country are, creating that type of backlog. And that's the reason, that's like case in point number one, why, emergency fund is so critical to give you that financial ability to navigate or weather the storm. As I wrote in the article, if the COVID is the tornado, the emergency fund is essentially your stay in shelter to help you, weather the storm when you're dealing with it. Another thing I would also, impress upon clients is make sure, to the extent you can, to keep your credit as stable and as strong as possible. Um, the ability to have solid credit will give you flexibility in your ability to either take advantage of certain adverse aspects. Certain drop in the interest rate can lead to the opportunity to refinance on your mortgage, or if you needed to move as a result of a job being eliminated, but a new opportunity sprouting up elsewhere. The ability to move quickly and to have your credit approved so you can move is critical. And also, unfortunately, in this day and age, everyone's credit is being checked for the purposes of getting employment. So that's another reason why that provides some flexibility. And then the third and last thing is, again, kind of going back to, that old adage that if you can't manage it, I mean, you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Having that budget keeps you in the driver's seat of understanding what's going on financially in your household. And by having that tool available to you and at your fingertips, it allows you to make choices, whether it's a cut, whether it's, finding ways to gain more value, negotiate, put services out to bid. These are all things that, people who are financially savvy do. And this type of tool is an asset to you, so that it enhances the flexibility and enhances your ability to make movements when you need to, especially during events like COVID.
Really great advice. Again, thank you so much for donating your time and your efforts for this presentation. I encourage you all to check out Sharif's blog at njcpablog.com and connect with him over on LinkedIn. So for all the folks watching, Sharif will be live for 10 minutes immediately following this presentation. So be sure to go back out to that agenda page and click into his Q&A. Thank you again, Sharif. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Danielle.